Good evening, all. Hope everybody had a fine day until now. We're back here on Gelvin Valley. Oh, and if I remember correctly, we are still making bales. Hopefully, getting somewhat to the end of it. Just two more fields left, 37 and 8. And then we'll get to go pick them all up and hopefully start making a dent in our cash position here, which is abysmal, to say the least. Today, actually the past couple days, I've been reminded of a lesson in math, that of geometric progression. We, not from any particular love of mathematics, but this weekend here, our families had a major family reunion. I live in Oregon, in the western U.S., and this is kind of where the family roots are, at least for a few generations. And a number of people in the family, it's gradually spread out. Some moved to the Midwest part of the country, Illinois, some of that kind of area, Kansas, central part of the country, if you will. And so a lot of them, they all came back home to Oregon, and we've had today we were away attending the reunion, and maybe when I explain a little as to some of the numbers involved, you'll understand what I mean by geometric progression. And I maybe have described this before. My I grew up in what I consider, and I was told, kind of a large family, but compared to the one my father grew up in, ours was not even half. Um, so my father is the oldest of 15 children. One of the kids didn't make it or survive being a baby, but the other 14 did. 7 boys, 7 girls, kind of an even match. They all grew up on Lone Oak Farms back in the day, and as they all spread out and started having their own families, some of them had some really good sized families in their own right. Um, my mom and dad had 7 children. I'm not sure what all the rest of them had, but tonight, to go there and see all these people, I gotta say, I didn't even know. Oh goodness, I'd say I didn't know half of them. I can't even claim that I know a third of them. I bet I only know probably a quarter. And those would be the ones that live out here, and I don't even know all the ones that live out here, to be honest. So it's, like I say, it shows kind of what a geometric progression looks like when when you have a large family and there are more large families and that kind of thing as a result. So, yeah, in my family there were 7 children, 5 boys, 2 girls. I'm the oldest in our family. I'm trying to remember the statistics. My step grandmother kept she kept meticulous data of all of her grandchildren that she inherited. She was a single lady all her life, and then in later years, my grandfather's wife, my grandmother, died, so he remarried. Oh, this had been back in '89, somewhere in there. And by then, they were past the age of childbearing. So he already had all the children before my step grandmother. But my step grandmother all of a sudden became a grandma. She's never been a mother. She'd been an aunt her whole life, to some others, but never a mother. And now all of a sudden she found herself a grandmother to literally hundreds of people. She kept a chart. She documented everybody, every grandchild, and I was just looking at the chart there tonight. I happen to be number 4 on that list, and I think is there 89? 89 grandchildren. Can you imagine? Or maybe you can. I mean, I don't know who I'm talking to here or who all will hear this. Maybe I know there's other very large families out there also, that have grown up in that environment and would know exactly, what that feels like and that kind of thing. But then also, she has started a chart for the next generation, the great grandchildren, many of whom are able to meet Grandpa before he passed, but a lot of them just never know him. Um, and I think that list, I can't remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure it's at 180 and above. So just a lot of people, and no, I don't think everybody is out here at this. There's some people for varying reasons couldn't make it or what have you. But I don't know, it's a pretty interesting day getting reacquainted with everybody to reminisce over times of old. And I just love sitting down with my father and his generation, my uncles, my aunts. You get them in a room and get them to talk about their growing up years, what it was like, working together as a family, work and play and all those things that they had to deal with back then, that some are similar, to what I had to deal with my growing up years, but there's a lot of differences too. And not just because of numbers, but, they grew up, I would say, fairly poor. Grandpa back in the day started his own farm from scratch. That's kind of what they did back then, with what eventually became Lone Oak. And, eventually, anybody looking at him would say, it was a success. But in the early years, it was anything but certain, in terms of how it would turn out. And right away, he and Grandma, started having a family, and so they had mouths to feed, and, just kind of how they navigated all of that. And probably like any healthy family, there's moments you get together, there's moments that you feel very sober, you remember some difficult times, but hopefully more often you remember all the good times, the good things you had together that maybe didn't even seem all that good as a time, but as you look back on them, you realize just how blessed or lucky you were and how fortunate you were to have, gone through whatever it was, and just the blessings of the family. And I realize not everybody looking at this is going to either, or hearing about this is going to understand. Some, I've learned over time too. Um, I don't just go around sharing about my family because I realize to some people it's literally offensive. They look at that and they see it as a drain on the Earth's resources, or that kind of thing. So, I suppose each person will have an opinion on that, and I'm not looking to change anybody's opinion on that. Each to their own, however they feel led. Uh, but what I will say, as you consider the family that I have, I don't know all of them, but I wouldn't trade them for anything else. There's none that I wish didn't exist. Um, it just is kind of one of those things that is what it is. You get placed somewhere on the planet and you grow into a situation and you didn't choose it. Um, they didn't particularly choose you. It's just kind of how things work. And there's a lot of screwed up things in this world, and I'll gladly take my situation over that of someone else's, that has some, maybe improvements in some areas, but a lot of detriments in other areas. And maybe we all feel that way. I don't know. anytime you try to walk in someone else's shoes or think the grass is greener somewhere else, a lot of times we find out that what we have is all right. So so I've been getting reacquainted with a lot of my cousins today, and so we were gone for a number of hours today, and thought I'd come back here and try to record an episode, and it makes me wonder what some of them would think if they knew I was talking about it on YouTube. But I think what I would tell them is, there's probably only two people that will ever listen to uh, this episode anyhow, and it'll be a while before this one's aired. So, it is what it is. It's funny too. I don't know if this is how it is with some of your families when you relive memories, even though you've heard these stories, 100 times. If it's something that's funny and you hear it again, told the same way, it still makes you laugh just as hard as it did the first time. If there's one of those stories, that I mentioned that would make you feel sober or, even cry or weep because of some of the hard things that happened, um, you still remember those things and it has the same effect on you. And I don't know, there's probably a term for that in psychology or whatever that would be. And I have no idea what that is, but it is an interesting dynamic that the human psyche can get a repeat of those things and have a similar reaction each time. But maybe it's different for you. I don't know. That seems to be how it is for me and a lot of people I know. Anyhow, we're kind of doing this reunion. I'm in my home right now, but it's close by. A lot of these people, kind of like I said, they literally traveled here from the Midwest, so they are thousands of miles away from their home, and so they've had to stay kind of on site at this. Oh, I guess it's a retreat center. It's owned by some local church in the area, and it has all kinds of activities and things we can do on it. I think we basically rented the whole place. And so, I mean, there's a swimming pool, there's a ball field, there's a basketball court, and there's a gymnasium. Just all sorts of things for all the young people and kids, and the age runs the gamut. I mean, we're talking, little squirts that were just born not that long ago, all the way to geezers who, can't really do much but sit there and yak. So it's kind of nice to have a place where we can kind of spread out and do a number of things and not be in each other's hair too much. Tomorrow happens to be Sunday, and I think in the afternoon we're planning to go visit the farm, where everyone grew up. That'd be Lone Oak Farm. So I'm looking forward to going back up there again, and I don't go up there near as often as I probably should, given that it's only a few miles from my home. But hope to take some pictures and just enjoy the area up there. It's been a wet spring here, so I think the harvest is probably a little bit delayed. Ordinarily by, let's see, what is today? Today is the 18th of June. Ordinarily by now they probably would be windrown or getting close to it. Maybe not quite yet. We're right on the cusp of it. Well, it's just been so cold and wet that, they haven't put down any windrows in the field or started prepping for harvest just yet. Just one of those wetter years, and I guess you have a few of those in there to make the averages be what they are. So in some ways, it's a good time to have a family reunion. If it was a normal year, I know my uncles and many others here would be kind of strapped for time as they get ready for the local harvest. So how about you? I mean, anybody listening here, what kind of a family do you have? And I hope it's mainly positive interactions you have. You know, families can be tough, and I'm not trying to paint a picture that everything in my family, is just in perfect or rosy or anything like that at all. I mean, we all have things that happen that, maybe are embarrassing, if they get out. And I'm not going to say any of those here. I mean, I could, but I'm not. I mean, that's just life, and you take the good with the bad. Um, but, but like I say, hopefully on the whole, that's something you wish for just everyone on the planet. That they can grow up in a family where, hopefully, ideally, they got both a mom and a dad at home that love them, that care for them. And I mean, what better start can a kid get to life than that? And if you don't have that, then something's a little broken. And I'm not going to say that you can't make it, or that it's impossible, or that a kid can't figure out, or that there's even kids that learn to thrive. Anything's possible. I'm just saying, just for the law of averages, if you don't have that, it seems like there's some additional struggles, that a person has. And, I feel bad for those situations. But those are reality, including in my family. I'm thankful, my parents had a really solid marriage, and they're still together. Um, that's a good pattern to follow. But there's been some others, where it hasn't gone that way. It's just tragic. So, but hopefully for anybody listening here, I hope the memories you have of your family are all good ones, and that you're still on good terms with them even today. I mean, believe me, I know it. I mean, growing up, I had my share of scraps with my brothers and little sisters, and some of that is just growing pains and learning to get along with people. But they're definitely my best friends now, so I wouldn't trade them for anything. I hope that's true by and large for anybody listening. Even if unrealistic, we can wish for things that may be hard to achieve, but it's kind of like, and I'm trying to avoid talking about politics or anything like that. I really don't want to get into that. But I think it's no secret that, that our country is polarized, and it's hard for people to get along. And you just wonder what it'll take to bring people more together and to realize, we're all on the same team, as fellow countrymen. And I know there's lots of different ways to look at things and do things. And, at the end of the day, we're all here, we're all in this together. And seems like it'd be nice if we could figure out a way to get along. And I think the average person can, but what it requires is maybe turning off the TV and ignoring the news sometimes. And sometimes I think the news media is pretty good at dividing people just by how they present things, and getting people up in arms, and pitting people, one group against this group. And maybe I shouldn't blame the news media. I don't know. I mean, they're people too. But they're also business people and want to sell something. And so, I don't know. It'd be nice, if we could always have the truth on those things instead of something that is an agenda driven, or I don't know what I'm trying to say. I just wish people would get along, whether families or anything else. And I think when communication breaks down between people, when they no longer respect one another, when they quit talking to each other, they just assume things, that isn't healthy. I don't think that helps people get along. work together at all. So I'm trying to think of some of my favorite family stories, and I don't know how meaningful they would be even to share some of them here. Um, a lot of times there's those things that happen in families that someone from the outside hearing the same account or the same thing would never fully understand or appreciate it quite like the family themselves do. And I don't know why that is. It's kind of like sometimes you say, well, I guess you had to be there, or had to know the people or what have you. And there's maybe some of that. But I know for me, it's just a treat listening to those stories because I get to hear how my father was as a young man, and it's growing up in his home. I know some of the things I did as a kid. Getting into trouble, and some of the things I was disciplined for by my parents. And when I hear some of these stories of things my dad did when he was a kid, it's like, not much has changed. I suppose some people would say the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, but it's just interesting realizing how human we all are. And if you have a good parent, they try to steer you right. They try to provide some discipline for you, so you learn that there is pain when you do the wrong thing. And I'm not trying to say talk about out of spanking even or that kind of thing. Goodness knows I had enough of them growing up. But that if you try to take the easy way out on a lot of things, sometimes that isn't always the best way to do things. And so we need the training of a parent, but oftentimes their training comes because they experienced the pains of growing up too. They made mistakes, and they don't want to see their kids repeat them. And I sure know that's how I feel. Some of the things I've screwed up on. I've prayed many times that my own kids don't make the same mistakes. And you know what? They probably won't. But it probably isn't going to be because of anything special I've taught them. It'll be they're different people. So they will screw up in different ways, and learn a lot of things on their own too. But it is fun listening and hearing what kind of a mischievous kid my dad was growing up, some of the stunts he pulled. And a lot of these were on the farm, kind of like I mentioned. My grandparents had 15, 14 kids, and of course they didn't all come at the same time. There was no twins, but right at the top, were three boys kind of all in a row. And so you have three young boys out on a farm. You have my grandfather, which would be their father, working his tail off to support his family, trying to start a farm. Actually, in those days, Grandpa did a lot of logging too, and he wasn't able to watch the boys like a hawk. My grandmother, for a period of time, was kind of a sickly woman. She had some health issues, so she wasn't often able to just have him around her. So what do, with three young boys, that can be quite busy, and you ship them out to the great outdoors on a farm with, they're going to look for stuff to do. And, there's kind of a story that the family has. It seems to get told every time we're together. It's, regarding my father, and I think the next boy down, my grandfather had a pickup truck, and, again, it was on a farm. So farms have lots of things like fuel and oil and grease, for the machinery that they have. That's just kind of the stuff they need to have on hand. Well, apparently my dad and one of my uncles, they were just little tykes. I'm assuming 5, 6, 7 years old, somewhere in there. They had tricycles, and I remember my dad telling me, he said they had the best lubricated tricycles on the planet because they would always go they watched, my grandfather lubricate the equipment or whatever, and so little boys will copy, what their dads do. So when Grandpa wasn't looking, they would go get grease, they would go get oil, and they would put it in their tricycles. And I think they were a bit more generous in what they put in there than what Grandpa would put on the farm equipment. So, so my dad told me one time, I think he and his brother, one time Grandpa was working out in the field, and the two of them were playing in the pickup truck over on the edge, and Grandpa had a big old barrel of oil in there. And I think, if I understand my dad correctly, they literally drained the entire drum of oil trying to grease up their tricycles. I mean, you think about the size of a tricycle and a drum of oil. I mean, it's just ludicrous. It must have made a horrific mess. I think they had oil from head to toe. Um, one of them, I mean, they just getting into stuff. Picked up a can of oil. He poured it over his head. I think that was my uncle that did that. So who knows what their poor mother had to deal with, when they got back. Yet the same one, who poured the oil over his head, I think he later said he also did it with a can of paint. He said they were sent down to put some stuff on a shelf after they had done some painting, and he said neither one of us thought, to make sure the lid was on properly. So he puts it up on the shelf and he tips it the wrong way and ends up with the entire gallon can of paint, just head to toe coated with it. He said he was pure white. And so poor grandma had to scrub him, gave him a thorough scrubbing and trying to get it off. And I don't think it was water-based paint either. I think it was enamel, so they had a dickens of a time trying to get that off of him. I think eventually they had to rub him in some gas or something, gasoline, just to try to tear some of the paint off. Probably tore some of the hide off too. And you think of some of those things, those are maybe accidents or whatever, or children playing, but I mean, there was all sorts of other mischief too that, I hear it, and I hear, it's funny, I hear more as I get older. Every time we get together, there's occasionally new stories brought out that I've never heard before, and I've teased my dad that there are still stories that I have to wait until I'm 50, before he will tell me, because he doesn't want me to go out and do it. Um, but but yeah, so I mean, there's just things that come out like today. This wasn't something new, but Grandpa had taken two, three boys with him to town in the family station wagon, and so they're in there. Grandpa goes into a store to do some business, and unlike today, you wouldn't do this today. He left his boys kind of in the front seat of the station wagon. So, Grandpa, of course, being that his business took him longer than 5 minutes, the boys are sitting there, well, where's Dad? And looking for something to do. So they start pushing on things in the dashboard, and they located the cigarette lighter. I don't know if they even put cigarette lighters in cars much anymore. But yeah, of course they pushed the thing in, they pulled it out. Wow, that thing's hot. And so then they started looking for things, where to put this hot thing, and they burned several holes in the upholstery of the seat, and it's like they just didn't even think, that maybe this wasn't a really good thing to do. But intuitively, when Grandpa finally came out of the store, they knew they had done something wrong. So they they covered the seat with their legs, I think, as they drove home. And then the funny part is when they got home, my grandpa couldn't figure out why they wanted to remain sitting in the station wagon. Once they got home, he's barking at him, "Come on, get out of there!" I guess he had to literally pull them out, and that's when he would see all the holes kind of in the upholstery. So these are just a couple examples of just a boatload of stories, from family times together. And, I don't know if anybody be willing to comment on some of the things they've gone through in their family. I imagine any one of us could share stories like this, the good, the bad, the ugly. And, fortunately, a lot of these anymore, you hear them and it makes you laugh. hearing it, but at the time, that, like I said, they were kind of poor back in that day, and so the idea of damaging equipment or even using a whole barrel of oil, on something, doing something kind of silly, it's costly. It costs the family budget, it costs grandpa something, and things turned out okay. But yeah, those little stunts pulled, they aren't always free, and so it wasn't just fun and games at the time. And it's only years later you can kind of look back on some of that silliness and have a good laugh. I can at least have a little laugh at my father's expense because I know how many things he disciplined me for growing up too. Generation passes to generation. Well, looks like according to the clock, I have already burned up a half hour of everybody's time. So maybe what I'll do is terminate the episode here and come back for another one. And so thank you all for taking time to stop by for a visit here. I hope you enjoyed your stay, and we'll talk to you again soon. Bye bye for now.